Now, remember the border crisis, the illegal immigration crisis that Joe Biden created? We saw millions cross that US southern border illegally every year under the Biden administration. The media made it clear, though, that this issue was not one the president could easily fix. Like good little state propagandists, they repeated the lie that Joe Biden was powerless to fix his own mess.
Republicans keep saying Biden doesn't need Congress. He can stop what's happening at the border all by himself. Can you fact check that for us? Because we here all know that's not true.
Republicans have been saying, largely wrongly, right, because saying that the president can close the border unilaterally on his own. The president actually doesn't have the authority under law to do that.
There's only so much President Biden can do with executive action, and he did try to do whatever he could.
They actually are doing everything they can.
The president's hands are tied. There's only so much that he can do.
President Biden has issued certain executive orders, but there's only so much he can do within his purview.
What an intractable problem this is for the president with no easy solutions.
No easy solutions here.
There are no easy solutions here, folks.
They need Congress to act to fix the broken immigration system.
This cannot happen without Congress resourcing this.
There's only so much a president can do with his pen and his phone.
But surprise, surprise, the media was wrong yet again. And this was something President Trump was happy to point out during his address to Congress.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation. We must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
Oh, that was a bit of a mic drop moment, wasn't it? Yes, it turns out the president didn't need Congress, didn't need new legislation, because in under a month, Donald Trump has managed to secure the border with illegal crossings at a 25-year low. You must have heard CBS to report the undeniable facts.
Illegal border crossings have sunk to the lowest level in at least 25 years. Do we know what's behind this drop in border crossings?
Well, look, I think we have to first emphasize how stunning and remarkable this drop is. Fewer than 9,000 migrants were processed at the U.S.-Mexico border after crossing into the country illegally in February. That is compared to some days during the Biden administration when Border Patrol recorded more than that on 24-hour time spans, including up to 10,000 people in a single day.
So we've gone from having up to 10,000 people cross illegally in a day to less than that over an entire month. Elections have consequences, folks. Let's bring in Newsweek's senior editor-at-large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel Josh Hammer. Josh, this is a stunning achievement. There's no other way to put it. Stunning turnaround in a month.
You know, Rita, there was a lot of misinformation in that montage that we just saw there. So I saw Jonah Goldberg, a bunch of others saying that the president does actually not have the authority to largely shut down the border. Well, as the case may be, I mean, not to brag, but I actually am a lawyer here. I clerked on a federal appeals court. The president actually does have sweeping authority. It's actually codified at 8 U.S. Code Section 1182, subsection F. It goes back all the way to the Immigration and Nationality Act of the 1950s, a foundational immigration statute there. And that basically says that the president has, at his own discretion, the ability to shut down the border to all admission of any classes or groups of migrants that he wants to. It is a sweeping delegation of immigration enforcement authority from the Congress to the president. That was actually the very statutory subsection that was litigated as part of the so-called travel ban case the first time during the first Trump administration. That was the Trump versus Hawaii case there, where the court actually ruled 5-4 that, yes, the statute means what it says. The president has sweeping authority there. So the court has said this there. The commentators, surprise, surprise, are dead wrong on the actual law there. Donald Trump is taking advantage of what the law actually says as it was litigated during his first administration there. And the results, as you said, speak for themselves. America has a secure southern border again. The people voted for it, and God willing, yes, they have it. And I think that the cartels are going to learn a very hard lesson here to the extent that they have not learned it already, because America's southern border right now, Rita, is not open for business.
Now, let's move on, Josh, to the Democrats claiming to be the party for women, for women's rights. But let's see how they voted when it came time to protect girls and women's sports from male athletes identifying as women. Every single Democrat voted against the rights of women here. And not only, I would argue, is this position morally putrid, It's also a fringe position. It's an extreme position because around 4 in 5 Americans are clear on this issue, as even CNN reported.
Transgender female athletes in women's sports, only 18% of the country says that they should be, in fact, allowed to participate in women's sports. Compare this to the opposition. I mean, my goodness gracious, 79%. You rarely get 79% of the country to agree on anything, but they do, in fact, agree on the idea of opposing transgender female athletes in women's sports. But it's not just the here and now, Laura. It's not just the here and now. What we're actually seeing is a trend on this particular issue, and it's going in the direction of opposition.
Josh, that trend is interesting. In 2021, we had 62% who were opposed. Now the figure is 79, and I suspect it's even more than that, because this is one of the issues where people have been shamed for holding a very much a common sense mainstream view.
Yeah, look, it's an 80-20 issue, as you said there. I mean, it's fascinating here in the States, Rita, because you see even very left-wing politicians like Gavin Newsom of California, who had this widely watched interview with Charlie Kirk on Gavin Newsom's own new podcast this week. And even Gavin Newsom, who literally became the first politician in California history to issue same-sex marriage licenses, back in the day, whenever that was. I mean, even this guy who was ahead of the curve on that issue there, he's saying that it's now deeply unfair when it comes to biological males competing against females in women's athletic competition. Now, to be clear, no one should believe Gavin Newsom for a second. The guy's a snake. He's a total liar there. He's trying to gear up for a 2028 presidential run. I wish him nothing but the worst there. But this is yet another losing issue for the Democratic Party there. And Rita, this continues to be the structural issue for the Democrats. I actually wrote about this in my most recent column, which is that you have this chasm between the Democratic elites, which are in total lunacy la land when it comes to the open borders issue, when it comes to the transgender issue there, when it comes to any of these other issues, the Green New Deal, environmental regulation, let's not frack, let's not drill for natural gas. They're in total la land. I mean, even the median Democrat, as we just saw in that CNN graphic there, does not agree with their own party's elites. So unless and until they can find some way to repudiate their own party's elites, the ladies of the View, the Barack Obama wing of the party there, unless and until they can do that, they're just going to continue to flounder in irrelevance. But again, as someone who wishes them nothing but the worst, I say, go on.
And I think you're 100% right about Gavin Newsom. I think he's just reading the room. He's seeing how fringe and unpopular these positions are, and he's just trying to position himself as some sort of centrist when you only have to look at California to see that's not the case. Now, let's talk about this curious story about what really happened during the Biden presidency and who was pulling the strings. Who was really in charge, because it was clear it wasn't Joe Biden for much of the time. It's been alleged that the majority of official documents signed by President Joe Biden used the same auto pen signature. This is a report by the Heritage Foundation. It states, we gathered every document we could find with Biden's signature over the course of his presidency. All used the same auto pen signature, except for the announcement that the former president was dropping out of the race last year. Josh, what do you make of this report?
Well, it's funny because that last line there is when I first saw this is where my mind immediately went. I saw a lot of people on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days, who when Joe Biden in theory had that I'm dropping out of the race announcement, you actually look at the signature. It looks a lot like a holograph. I mean, that's not typically where my mind goes there. But, Rita, in recent years, when it comes to the Hunter Biden laptop, when it comes to COVID-19, when it comes to the fact that, yeah, we all knew that Joe Biden was running the country in geriatric senile fashion, a lot of these so-called conspiracy theories really are kind of coming true in real time there. I guess the question for me is that as we continue to learn more and more about just the exact state of Joe Biden's physical and, above all, mental health over the course of his horrific and historically all-time atrocious presidency. As we continue to learn more and more, and God willing, Congress will do more investigations. Frankly, I think we've barely scratched the surface of this world historical scandal. But as we learn more and more, the question to me is going to be actually this question of who really was pulling the strings. I will tell you my own personal take on this, Rita. It's not a novel take there. It's probably a common opinion there. I have long been of the opinion that it actually is Barack Obama, who was not necessarily running the world per se, but I think that Barack Obama was absolutely, probably more than any other figure, calling a lot of the shots. There was this one very bizarre image of him going to 10 Downing Street in London, trying to meet with the prime minister there. I mean, why would a former president do that? He was also the first president in over 100 years to not physically vacate Washington, D.C. He stayed in Kalorama, a very Tony upscale part of Washington, D.C. there. I continue to think that, Rita, that Barack Obama actually largely was governing in this Biden administration, which makes sense because then he was the leading campaign trail surrogate for Kamala Harris herself there. We all saw how that played out, by the way.
Josh, we've spoken previously about Donald Trump's strategy with the Ukraine-Russia war and the goal of having Europe contribute in a much more meaningful way to their own defence. And it looks like Trump has again managed to get the outcome he wanted, despite all the hysteria, all the doomsday commentary we've had from politicians and commentators, including, I've got to say, disappointingly, some conservative commentators who should know better. Stop getting hysterical about the rhetoric. Look at the bigger picture, look at the strategy, look at the outcomes. Let's hear now from the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilize close to 800 billion euros of defense expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe.
Josh, did the president get his way again? He's been wanting this, and really it should have been in place all along. Europe shouldn't be depending on America to defend it from Russia or any other aggressive force.
Yeah, it strikes me as another huge diplomatic, geopolitical, foreign affairs victory for the president. You know, this very much builds, Rita, by the way, on what he accomplished the first time around. So the first time around, you know, Donald Trump also ruffled a lot of feathers when it comes to NATO. People tend to forget this, but he basically came in there and he said in a series of speeches and pronouncements, you know, you guys are not pulling your weight there. You know, the NATO treaty obligates you to spend at least 2%, ideally 5% of your gross domestic product on defense spending, on military spending there. And if you look back over his first term from 2017 to 2021, the total number of European countries that actually met that bare minimum 2% threshold roughly doubled. It was an astronomical increase there. So he's done this before, and he's doing it yet again there. But look, Donald Trump is a nationalist, okay? He believes in strong, sovereign, independent nation states there. What that means is that the United States is going to best partner with Europe when Europe can actually take care of itself, when Europe can actually take care of its own backyard. This notion that the U.S.-European alliance thrives when Europe is basically a glorified satrapy, when they're basically a province of the global American empire there, that's not a recipe for long-term United States-European stability. Frankly, it's not a recipe for long-term stability when it comes to the United States and any other country around the world that we've been allied with in the past there. So this is the Donald Trump foreign policy doctrine. It worked like a charm, frankly, the first time around, and it's off to a heck of a start this time around as well. I frankly think, Rita, it's only going to get better from here, if I had to guess.
Yes, I mean, we've seen NATO be strengthened. We've seen the European nations that have basically have done very little finally start contributing to their own defence. And yet we've got the hysterics acting like this is the end of the world and democracy itself is under threat. Now, before you go, Josh, this is one of the most disturbing developments, but sadly entirely predictable. We are seeing some horrific footage out of Syria, religious minorities, including Christians, being tortured, being slaughtered, men, women, children. And this horror was, as I said, sadly predictable. Tulsi Gabbard was amongst those who warned us about what would occur, but there were people celebrating what happened in Syria, thinking this was going to be the dawn of some new age of democracy and human rights, when we've got Islamists in charge there. And when Islamists are in charge, minorities are slaughtered.
So this goes back at least as far as the Arab Spring, which started back in 2010, 2011, around there in Tunisia and really all throughout the Arab world there. You had this massive conflation with many people on the neoliberal left and the neoconservative faux right. You had this massive conflation between democracy and Islamism, where you saw kind of this democratic uprising or this populist uprising, but this populist uprising was being done in the name of what? In the name of Sharia supremacy, of Islamism, of radical fundamentalist Islam there. And, that's basically what happened here in Syria. I mean, Bashar al-Assad, let's not mince words. I mean, an absolute monster. I mean, a death toll of hundreds and hundreds of thousands, arguably over 1 million. An absolutely horrific person there, a total pawn of the evil Iranian regime there. And the world is better off that he's not in power. But we should not be pretending like the current guy in charge, al-Jilani, who was a peripatetic jihadist over his entire career there, former al-Qaeda there. These are bad, bad, bad people there. And frankly, at this point, they're basically just an extension of Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the increasingly radical regime in Ankara, Turkey there. So the Middle East is totally in flux, but this is obviously on a pure humanitarian level, an absolutely horrific situation there. Rita, one thing I will add briefly is that Israel right now is extending its reach into southwestern Syria, is trying to protect the Druze minority that is there in that particular part of the country there. Maybe there'll be some sort of momentum for kind of an autonomous Druze mini nation state or something. That would be a fantastic development. Frankly, it's something that the United States, I think, actually would do very well to get behind. But at a bare minimum, let's not treat these absolute jihadist thugs in Damascus like they're anything other than the thugs that they are.
And I think you're 100% right there that there would be support in America for some sort of intervention to try to protect those religious minorities. I think that is the sort of military action that Americans, maybe not an enormous majority, but I think many Americans would be comfortable with. Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rita.